right, doing something on beauty and faith. Like I'm trying to work through this reasoned argument, sustained argument on how beauty will save the world. And little by little, I'm trying to dig into it rather than just, there's no answer per se. So today's topic, this beauty and faith, a little bit different. Most of us don't automatically connect beauty with our particular faith expression, particularly like in the Western tradition, right? I mean, which is kind of odd in a way because this is very ancient and it's not hidden, but it's often undiscovered. So for those of us in the Western Christianity, this is kind of new. Now, in some Eastern religions or some other types of expressions, you might find this, and that's okay. But for a Christian who looks outside, I guess this is an opportunity to rediscover it. Like when you met somebody like from another culture, like they were an exchange student or something. There's something novel about it. There's something curious about it. There's something that's maybe even want to say mysterious, but it's enchanting, right? It's almost as if what does this person have to offer me? Because this is so new to me, and there's an attractiveness there. I think that sometimes those of us that have grown up in the Western Christian tradition, we see that on the outside. In other words, that seems more attractive than what's here in our own particular faith. So this is my attempt to show you that this stuff does exist within the Christian tradition, even if it's leans a little bit more towards the Orthodox understanding of the faith. Still, it fits in perfectly with even a Roman Catholic ethos. So we're going to kind of take a look at it here, see what is different about it and such. Okay. In the book of Genesis, in the priestly mythos, right, in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth. Remember, it was almost as if God was speaking, from the priestly perspective, where he was sitting in a chair declaring things, this, giving the word, and then it happened. And then at the end, he would say, this is good. This is good. And then to the sixth day, when all creation was done and he rested, he says this was very good. What the word that's being used there in Hebrew, is tov. So you might think like mazel tov. So it's not an unfamiliar term to those of us that even are not Jewish, right? It means good, but it has other variations, right? It could also mean pleasant, and it could also mean beautiful. So we're going to kind of like latch on to that a little bit, right? So when God said at the end of each thing that he did, this is good, this is beautiful. Now we use a term like that sometimes, I think. So this isn't foreign to us, right? When things just work out the way they are, that's beautiful. That's beautiful how it happened, right? So we still understand that. So we're going to have to try to connect, this good, tov, with beauty, and also understand it in that this is a term too, even though it's a phrase, right? It's as if it was created to be. In other words, this is what it was meant to be. So when God created all these things, he could say, this is it. This is how I meant it. This is good. This is beautiful. So that's where we're going to start with all of this stuff a little bit. And that's a little bit different understanding, right? Especially if you get caught up in the literalism of Genesis, which I've done my best to make sure we don't do that. So what we are then saying is that, and what God is saying, and what we use this book of Genesis to kind of get an insight into who we are as human persons, as we can look at that book and say, whatever we see there, that's how it should be. Those things are in right order. So we see the right order between man and God. In other words, it's good, it's beautiful, it's tov, right? That's a good thing. And then we see the right order between all human people. There's nobody who's trying to oppress the other. We even talked about Adam and Eve, how they can have the interior gaze. They didn't have to cover themselves to hide something that was private that could be objectified, right? So the relationship between men, all mankind, was good. It was beautiful. The relationship between all humanity and the other creation, the environment, that too was in right order. So all these things existed, and that's a different understanding. If we can look at that and say, those things were beautiful. And we pick apart a certain sense of justice that we see there, right? And we're always trying to get back to that. Like, how do we reapply this justice that had? How do we rediscover this right order that we had when we lived in that particular state? Okay? So anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit today about Fyodor Dostoevsky. I've already mentioned him, the Russian novelist, in his book, The Brothers Karamazov. You really should read it. It's a thick book. But there are some parts, we call them of the Western canon, right? They're just, a list of books that are extraordinary. And that's one of them. I mean, there's a few by Fyodor Dostoevsky. But it deals with a lot of things that are really pertinent to the human person, and one is this free will. In other words, we've damaged ourselves through this. So, I mean, we've already talked about how God has to give free will. Because if he can't give free will, then we can't love. And if he isn't free to do this, then he can't love. So love can have no coercion. So it has to be free. But the problem is that, when Adam and Eve ate from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it wasn't what they were doing. What that story is supposed to tell us is that they were determining for themselves what was tov, what was good and was beautiful. And they didn't do very well, and we're not doing very well, right? So we're poor lovers. We don't know how to love well. We don't really know how to choose what's beautiful well. We're in this disordered state, and we're trying our best to figure a way out of it. Now I think this is a lot richer understanding of Genesis if you don't get caught up in the literalism, right? I mean, I think that somehow that there's this right order, and then after the fall, something changed, all right? So what happened with the fall? All right. Well, first of all, now we do get to determine for ourselves what is good and beautiful, and it may not be good and beautiful for us. In other words, we're choosing with a clouded intellect. Could you imagine having to make decisions in your life and you don't really have all the information? How would you feel about that? Do you ever feel like you're put in a pressure situation, like you got to choose now? You're like, how do I choose? I don't know how to choose. I don't know all these I don't know all the ramifications of my choice. Okay, well, that may be an instance predicated on other things, but in this particular circumstances, we don't know that we don't know sometimes. But we think we know, which is kind of bad, right? It's almost like an exaltation of ignorance. It's like we think we know, but we don't, but we're still making choices and we're not doing it well. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have this clouded intellect and not everything is going to be clear to us, right? So what happens is, and our distorted passions, right? Like our instincts and our passions are driving us, and we can't always bring our intellects to put them in the proper order. So we will seek pleasures, sometimes in lesser things, and call them good things, right? So remember I told you the term first things has to do with that these first things are the things that are rightly ordered for us. But a person who struggles with alcoholism will choose the lesser thing. In other words, they can never experience the first thing, which is the joy that's supposed to come from it, because they get caught in another thing. Now, I'm not trying to say that there's diseases and other things that are at issue there, but just as an example, you get the idea. So oftentimes it's like eating too many carbohydrates, right? And then we're still hungry afterwards. So we're always trying to fill this gap, but we don't quite know how to do it. In other words, we're left in a state of anxiousness. I mean, this is our story, right? From a Catholic ethos, this is our story. That we had this, we were all right ordered, we knew what was good, but we wanted to choose it for ourselves. So now we live in this state of clouded intellect, passions that are disordered, and we are just, sustained with doubt and anxiety, and we don't know how to work through this. Now, somebody might say, well, I don't believe in Christianity, so I don't quite accept that. But I think you'd still accept that we're in a state of anxiety. You couldn't read existential literature and not come to that conclusion. Again, let's go back to Albert Camus. I mean, when he writes the myth of Sisyphus, which is that guy that's pushing the boulder up the hill, that's his entire life. When he gets to the top of the hill, comes back down. And why does Albert Camus say the greatest philosophical question is suicide? Like, if there's no purpose to living, why am I still living? So he determines it must be in the struggle. So the struggle that we're going through, I guess we'll find meaning in that. Even though there's no meaning in life, we'll find meaning in trying to find meaning. We have a different story, right? We're trying to say, no, there's something else that's going on here. We just have to be, and it has to do with beauty, which is kind of odd because we don't think of it that way. Again, just to reiterate, tell somebody beauty will save the world and they'll laugh at you. Beauty will fix politics. Try that one out in the public sphere, see how it goes. They'll laugh at you. It's going to take some time to make an argument. I'm doing it over the course of a few weeks, and that's not going to be conclusive. Probably should be a course, something like that, right? So how do we fill these voids, right? All kinds of ways. Now, and by the way, remember, we're never choosing between goods and evils. That's one of these myths in life. We're always choosing between competing goods, which means that, let's say that you make your goal to, be a highly educated person. What's wrong with being a highly educated person? Nothing, unless that becomes an end in itself. Now you've made something that should be just a means to an end as its own goal. There's an issue with that. Even like a career. Well, I want to have a career that I can provide for my family. Well, that sounds good, but what does that mean? Sometimes the careers come at the expense of the family. And what does it mean to provide for your family? Provide things that they need, or provide things that everybody wants, and we can be, rise above the Joneses. I mean, we have issues going on in our country. I just read an article that came out how, in the United States, suicide's like an increase, it's like an all-time high in the United States. Now, that's a little difficult because it has something to do with, the certain parameters of the wars that are going on and veterans and stuff that could throw it off. But nonetheless, I mean, we're not happy as a people, and we're trying to find ways to be happy. So we're coming up to Christmas, right? I mean, it's funny how, when you talk to younger people, you ask them how their Christmas was, they always tell you what they got, which is kind of odd. Well, it's Jesus' birthday. It's just coincidental. Jesus' birthday falls in the fourth quarter, so we can fix everything economically, But the reality is, we couldn't imagine a non-consumer in Christmas. And without going down that road, let's at least say this. We said it before in class. Even when you're young, you want this for Christmas and you get it, and about a week after, the shine's gone. I mean, it's carbohydrates in our lives, but we don't see it that way, right? So we're always finding ways, and we could find the ways to do this with love. Well, it's not the love as, properly, but we could find ways to do this with other people, right? I mean, we're trying to fill these voids because we've been left with this. And two, this is something else that we don't think about. You can intellectualize all this. I mean, some people will fall into where, I have to have everything, proven to me, logically, because I'm a reasonable, empirical person. That too could become an end in itself. But the point is, all of this stuff, it doesn't matter, what we're doing, if we're doing it intellectually, or if we're doing it emotionally, or if we're purchasing things and being consumers, we're trying to fill a void that's been left. All right? And this is not unlike what Augustine said in his Confessions, that my heart is restless. So this is our state. So even if somebody doesn't believe in Christian God, I mean, we all share this. We know that we're in a state of anxiousness. Okay? But from a Catholic ethos standpoint, we have a different ethos, a different story to show us perhaps how we can get out of that. Let me tell you, well, let me see. Do I want to do that here? Yeah. Okay. Let me just give you a little bit about this before I bring a quote up for Fyodor Dostoevsky, the brothers Karamazov. Yeah, there's a bunch of brothers, and I'm not going to give you all the characters list, okay? But Zosima and Alusha, they're faith-bred brothers, okay? They try their best to live a faith. They try to live in friendship. They try to live, how do you want to say, an ordered life. They do their best, okay? There's another guy, make sure I'm not going to get these goofed up. Okay, Ivan. Ivan Karamazov is the intellectual. So he's always looking for some reason, logical deduction to make his way through life. It leaves him often in a state of despair. This whole book's just about, it's a thick one, this whole book's about the human experience, right? And then there's Dmitri. Dmitri is like the emotional driven one, right? He's always following his passions, and then he too is often left without any particular satisfaction. So, you could see, I mean, there's a reason why I entered some philosophical elements in the last couple of classes. Just in that little grouping, you can see those people that have a faith base, you can see those people that have a rationalist, imperialistic faith, like Ivan, and then Dmitri, who would have that romantic understanding, that view, that emotive view, all right? So anyway, there's a quote here, and this is what I was leading up to. You have to understand, in the book, they're laying out like two ideals, right? So the ideal of beauty is the Theotokos, the God-bearer, the Mary, the mother of God. She's the epitome of beauty, right, and of goodness. And then they use Sodom as the epitome of despair. So Dmitri, the Epicurean-type brother, he comes up with this quote, and it's interesting. He says, "Believe me, that for the immense mass of mankind, beauty is found in Sodom." Right? Now, he's just using that as a way to say that we're looking in all different ways for pleasure. We're trying to fill these voids, right? And do you know that secret? The awful thing is that beauty is mysterious as well as terrible. God and the devil are fighting there, and the battlefield is the heart of man. Well, we're going to jump off that last part, right? So we're going to say from a Catholic ethos point of view, we have to understand this is not an intellectual Bible. And it is a spiritual battle, but the battle's in the heart, right? So we're not going to win it with the mind, we're not going to win it with our instincts. We're going to have to find a way, like we did with Men Without Chest, to connect the visceral, right, and the intellectual. And we're going to find out the heart. So we have to understand that whatever affects the body affects the heart. And we can't be dualistic people, right? So I remember I talked about, we could talk all day about the rules of sex before marriage. You can go all day about that, but once you start understanding that nothing we do with our body does not affect the heart, then the question changes, not do we follow a rule, but in what way does this affect my heart? You know, that's a different story, and that's not one that's so rule-based, and it's not so one that's easy to answer, too, right? But nonetheless, let me make sure I'm not missing anything here. All we can say from this, the very least we can say from this quote, is that beauty's been distorted. And we're going to have a hard time seeing it as it should be. We're going to have a hard time seeing it as it was created to be. We're going to have a hard time seeing it as Tov is good, right? And things are not in right order, and we realize that. So then, we're going to talk in terms of, if we want to get back to where we have this justice and peace, then we have to get back to right order. And in order to get back to right order, we have to have some redemption of the understanding of beauty. So think of this. Remember early on in the course, the epistemological ladder, episteme is how we know things. So I told you that from the ancient Greeks, we would understand things first through beauty, and then beauty would lead us to truth, and then through truths we would ultimately be led to goodness. So beauty, truth, and goodness was the epistemological ladder. Well, think if you were the devil and you wanted a strategy to really screw people and misguide them. What would be the best way to do it? To kick out the bottom rung on the ladder. If I could mess them up and destroy their sense of beauty, then how would they get the truth? If they can't get the truth, they're not going to get the goodness. And then it says, I win. You know, that kind of thing. So we're going to look in terms like, how do we do this? And there's no like just one simple answer, right? But there's techniques and there's understandings, at least how you could say, there's ways that we can live our life that can make this at least more advantageous, right? All right. I already said this. So we have a distorted vision of beauty, just like we have a distorted vision of goodness and a distorted vision of truth because of the clouded intellect and distorted passions that we have. So the article, which is, by the way, was written from an Orthodox Christian point of view, big O, right, not just right belief, although that's what that word means. And he says, we find ourselves in this joyful sorrow, right? So we have this like eternal longing, the same thing that, Augustine talked about, this restlessness. So in other words, we know that there's something that will fill that, but we also know it's never going to be done here. So we're joyful that we know that there is something there that will fulfill this longing that we have, that will put things back in right order. But on the other hand, we're going to have to also accept that we can't have it here. Which brings us back early on. Remember I said about if we get the earthly city and the heavenly city confused, we're going to think that the justices and everything and peace that exist in the heavenly city could be here, now, in an ideal state. And if we have that in our heads, especially as undergraduates who, rightfully so, are, very idealistic, you're going to wind up being frustrated when you realize this is impossible. So then you fall back into a position saying, how do I bring as much as possible from the heavenly city to the earthly city? Realizing that it's never going to be satisfied and fulfilled here. Then that becomes a different orientation, right? So we already talked about that really early on. But this is all part of what the author talks about as the joyful sorrow, okay? And by the way, this all has to be done at the center of the heart. The heart, and let's just understand it this way. If we're having a problem with any imagery, it's the center of man's being, all right? We're using the word heart just to represent the center of the human person's being. And we're trying to say that it's there that all these battles are going to be fought. Which is, I guess I could spend more on that, but let's not. So what happens is, we're stuck trying to fill the void. And just like I do it all the time, right? Like remember I told you my doctor said, cut back on the spaghetti, cut back on the bread. So what we had yesterday, a pound, linguine with fettuccine, a pound of marinara, and my wife made like, I think, 3 loaves of garlic bread. I mean, this is not how you're supposed to go through life with your diet, but hey, what are you gonna do? But the problem is, you know, it is true that when you don't get the protein, there was meatballs, but when you don't get the protein in those things, you wind up just being hungry afterwards, right? But we all do it. I mean, we all snack. Well, maybe not all. Those of you that, you know, have more stamina than me, you know, if it's not time for supper but you're hungry, you're going to grab whatever's staying around. I have no willpower for that. The only willpower I have is not in the house. You know, I tell my wife, get this stuff out of the house. Don't be baking this stuff. You know, you want to, well, I like cooking. Well, fine, cook. Make brownies and then give them to the kids. Get them out of here. That kind of things. I have no willpower, you know. Her response is, well, you should. Well, yeah, okay. But, you know, I try to explain to her that I'm in a state of fallen state and I don't have properly right-ordered, you know, passions. She says, that's tough. Just don't eat it. Anyway, so we're spending our time searching for this. Now, the thing is to find beauty at the inner part of our being is going to require silence. And we're scared of silence. We're absolutely scared of silence, you know. Think of how our lives, you know, are filled with noise. And I don't even mean sound, although I do mean that. They are just things that distract us. And it's very hard for us in a technological age. I mean, first of all, you know, you and I know how much TV people watch, right? Even when it's on in the background. Walking around with earbuds all the time. Phones. We can't be without these phones for 15 minutes. I mean, you wonder what's going to happen. I mean, these things, like everybody always said, like phones disconnect us from other people. I never thought that. I always thought they disconnect us from ourselves. You know, they are the robbers of peace, right? I mean, so I'm not trying to make connections to like attention deficit disorders and stuff. That's not my field. Although I found it was pretty odd. Was it like a fad a few years ago to give people fidget spinners? You know, you can't concentrate, so here, fidget with this. Now you can't concentrate, but I'm concentrating on the fidget, you know, that kind of thing. Well, they figured out that was just a marketing gimmick. But nonetheless, this is what we're trying to do. I mean, those fidget spinners speak to the fact that we are trying to find things to calm this inner turmoil that we have. And we'll do it in all different ways. And, you know, now, I don't get overly, you know, hard on people about phones, because my one friend that passed, you know, may rest in peace, pointed out to me that they're not that different sometimes from, like, newspapers. So he says, you know, he was an electrician in the break room, and he'd go in and review on their phone. But he said, you know, 15 years earlier, we'd be looking at a newspaper. Well, I get that. But then we also have to accept that that's not always the case. I mean, you know, you can go down to Cross City Ave, and when you're waiting for, you know, that little thing, you wait for a while, I kept thinking, who the hell's talking to me over here? I mean, almost everybody's on their phones before they cross. I mean, and so this stuff is distracting us. But it's just, it's really epidemic of this. And have we ever thought about the fact that all these things that are distracting us are robbing us of beauty? And that's a different argument, isn't it? Again, it would sound corny if you just said it to somebody. But if you had time to at least kind of tie it all in, I think it's a little more compelling than simply saying, get off the phone, that type of thing, right? So anyway, in your article, I'll hold off on that. What am I missing, though? Here's a chance for you to talk. What are big distractions in life? Not just like phones and stuff, but what are things that are really distracting in life? What can you get addicted to watching or to doing? Or help me out for my notes for next time I teach this course. Sports? I mean, you know. I mean, did I see right? Is it like Thursday Night Football now? Is that right? I told my wife, I said, when the hell did that start? It used to be Monday Night Football, you know.
Yeah, I was gonna say like football or like soccer, fantasy leagues. Like my family every week, like on Sundays, they pick out their teams. And everything.
Yeah, I mean, and see, these things aren't bad, all right? So you can't vilify them.
Like 2 years in like school.
You could. Yeah, you really could. I mean, even they're good things. You know, things have changed too. And, you know, if you resist them, you're going to be a stick in the mud. You know, that's people come out and tell me, you know, come on. Like, now this isn't, me and my wife are good at this. Like Christmas, we don't buy each other presents. We haven't done it for years. I mean, it just gets old, right? And it's like, you know, you don't have the money for this stuff. And if you really needed something, you're going to buy it anyway. So why do I have to buy something and hide it from me and then show it to you? Oh, you know, that kind of thing came out of the same checkbook. I mean, you know, so we stopped that a long time ago. And this is something, you know, this is like, you know, when we talk about eureka experiences, you know, here's one I had. You know, maybe you think this, so I don't know, but do you ever wonder like why people aren't like, they're always nice at Christmas, and everything seems like happy at Christmas, and why are people like that all year round, and why aren't things like that all year round? That's what I thought. And I remember one time, this girl I used to date, I ran in toward our town, and it was night, the shopping, everything was shopping, all the lights were out for Christmas, and there was snow on the ground. I mean, it was like one of these like picture perfect things, right? And I thought to myself, you know, why can't it always be like this? And two things hit me. One, I'm not always like that. And maybe because I'm not always like that, then I don't do that for anybody else. So what I tried to do, and this is probably where I come across as a little bit, you know, fanatic with this, is I stopped trying to have a Christmas feeling. Because I thought that's commercialized in my mind. So I tried just like to do away with it, and it took years. But what it did for me was it changed my understanding of the season. So, you know, we're in a new liturgical year now. For those of you that, you know, are Christian, Advent starting on Sunday. So we are in a now new liturgical year. This is supposed to be, you know, 4 weeks of penitence and 4 weeks of preparation, followed by Christmas, which is supposed to then be the celebratory things. So if you can get out of the commercial zone of it, you almost could treat Advent like Advent, and then you could be happy for 12 days of Christmas like everybody's supposed to be, that kind of thing, right? So, but it takes time to move all those things through. Like sports. You know, when I was a kid, I played midget football, and all I remember was my mom, you know, washing my clothes. That was it. She goes, hey, I did your shirt, Stevie, so go down. And I'd go down to practice and come back, even in high school. Now, the team I played for in high school, it was ranked nationally. They're like one of the top 20 teams in the United States, right? So this is a big, big thing. 10, 12,000 people at a particular game. My mom never came to a game. She listened to the radio, and I came up, how'd you do? There was none of this, you know, understanding that you had to be there for every moment. So how did it work with my kids when they played, you know, lacrosse, or not lacrosse, they played field hockey or whatever, the softball they were in. If you wouldn't go to every single practice and set your chairs up and have all your drinks, it's like they're going to call child and youth. Don't you care about your kids? You're not going to all these practices. And then they ask you to bring stuff to sell at the, you know, the food stands. So you have to bring stuff to donate to the food stands, and then you're supposed to go and buy stuff that you brought for free. I mean, the whole thing just seemed goofy, and I wanted no part of it. I'm like, this is ridiculous. You know, I mean, we're creating these industries over something, right? Well, to me, this is noise. I mean, you know, and I don't know how you get out of this. People have to make a decision, not me. It's the same way you'll make a decision, not a bigger house, not a bigger car, or need a bigger job. I mean, it's like these things are going to be countercultural. So nonetheless, these things are noise, and these things are distraction. Because in many ways, these things are just us trying to fill a void. But we don't, and we never really connect it back to beauty. You know, we're going to go back and say, well, what does the church think? Well, that's their rule. You know, and we get caught up in that circle. And a lot of times that's how it's taught. And that's their problem too, but nonetheless. All right? So the only way to recover this, not Hesychus prayers is the only way to recover it, but the only way to recover it is silence. Once again, to seek out and try to have silence in your life. Just be silent. I mean, isn't that a biblical phrase? Be silent, know that I am God. So think about when you drive the car. Don't turn the radio on. Think. God forbid, pray. You know, I mean, everybody thinks prayer has to be formal, right? What am I going to say? Dear Jesus, dear God, you know, this kind of thing. We don't quite understand how all these things work. Or talk to people. I just saw in the news yesterday, what restaurant is giving free meals to kids if the parents don't go on the phones while they're there? Does anybody know? Nobody else heard that? I mean, I just heard on the news yesterday. But I thought, could you imagine? Restaurant owners are getting ticked. Everybody being on their phone, they say, we'll give a free meal to your kid if the parents just stay off the phone while you're there. And you know that's true, right? You go to a restaurant, you look around, everybody's on their phones. My kids, I mean, maybe you've done this, I don't make fun of you, but you know, they'd both be in the room sitting on the bed when they were younger, texting each other. They're like 3 feet away. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? You know? God forbid. Fortunately, it wasn't the day when the text cost money. I don't know if you remember those days where you only had X amount of, you know, text that you can do after that. You know, they start chalking up. But nonetheless, so what the article talks about is this orthodox spirituality known as the Hesychus prayer, right? So there's elements to it. But it really has to do with like a seeking of silence. And it's a way almost to be I don't want to be cliche, but to become one with yourself. Okay, but the difference here is this is not like some out-of-body experience. The Christian tradition totally rejects that. It's not like astral projection. It's always, Christianity is an incarnate understanding of the relationship with God. So everything must be in the body, right? So this understanding is somehow, like, remember, anything that happens, if we start to say that things outside the body or things the body does doesn't affect the inner part of the being, you're now in a dualistic understanding of the human person and a very dangerous understanding of the human person. You know, and then they would call it Gnostic, right, from that ancient heresy where it can go either way, where the body means nothing, so do whatever you want with it. Literally, those Christian sects were having orgies because it has no effect on the body, to the other part where we're going to dismiss the body. And not even feed it or worry about that because it's the inside that always counts. And Christianity has always maintained that it has to be, you know, this entire understanding of the body. So this is really about getting yourself in silence so that you can almost be comfortable with who you are. And you're going to need space to do this. I mean, this is not, Heska's prayer is not something you can do all the time, per se, right? So we all have our quiet places, and it's okay. I mean, I know people that are into yoga, and that's fine, right? So they'll set up like a quiet place with yoga, they'll have particular music playing, they might put up candles and stuff. It's like, why don't we do this for our own spirituality? Maybe that is your spirituality, but from a Christian point of view, why don't we do this with our own spirituality? Set up those places, you know? And it's gonna be busy when you guys get jobs and have kids. There's gonna be times in your life when these things are more difficult than others. But you're still going to have to find time. I mean, we always find time for the things that we want. That's one thing we should always accept. We rationalize otherwise, but we always find time for the things and the people that we want, right? So let me see if there's anything else I want to say particularly about this. I want to say this. You know, synergistic is this understanding that it's a combination of things, right? So something that is very particular to Catholic and Orthodox spirituality is synergism. It is what separates from other Protestant and other faith expressions, for the most part, right? I can't speak so blankly, blanketly. This is our little paradox. Why is it that a God who is necessary would involve mankind who is unnecessary in his own works? Remember how I used the example about the mother having her child bake cookies with her, even though she was sufficient for the task? Love asked the child to share in the endeavor, okay? And even though what the child did didn't really change anything, it still remained a full contribution. That's like it with this. So what's neat about this, if you want to call it that, is think in terms of God existing within us, and then that Spirit actually with us praying back to God. So remember how I told you about this perichoretic, this like interaction within the Trinity, how the Father loves the Son returns the love to the Father, and the Holy Spirit communicates it back and forth. It's an entering into that. So this is a very sacramental understanding of prayer. And so it's almost as if God is within us, drawing himself back to himself and taking us along for the ride, but wanting us to be part of it. So what is our part? And this is very crucial for you to understand. Our part is this understanding of repentance. Because that all we can really do is be sorry for those things that we have done. Now, again, right away, if you had the upbringing I did, that throws you into this like, you know, legally based understanding of relation with God. So we're starting to put stuff on the scales. What pissed him off, what made him happy, and I hope I did more things to make him happy than piss him off so I go to heaven. I mean, that's how, even though I was told that wasn't it, that's how I understood things, right? This kind of breaks through that a little bit. See, now we're not talking about what I did was good or bad. We're talking about, was it right ordered? Was it told? Was it good? Was it beautiful? You know, was it as it was meant to be? That's a little bit different. That's not as legalistic now. So now, you know, if we understand sin a little bit more in that way, and not just simply as a rule that's been broken, then we can understand how, you know, this participation that God is within us is a reordering of our passions and our desires, an unclouding of our intellect. And that's a little bit different, you know, and it's kind of neat when you look at it that way too, okay? So let's see what else here. This could be prayer without ceasing. There's no doubt about that, right? So all the things in our lives that did create the noise and the distraction, it's not just turn the radio off. It's not just, get off Facebook or Twitter or whatever. It's not just put the phone down. It's all the other things in life that could be distracting for us. Good things. Good things that we have made idols in themselves, and we've chosen those things over the higher things. Again, if you can imagine being married for 75 years, and then you would look back and all the little decisions you made to choose that person over the particular job, what do you want to say, promotion or extra money or a bigger car, so I have to work more, you would look back on all those things as they meant nothing to you, right? It's these experiences that you have grasped on, these sharings of love, that really are the things that you want. So if we can just kind of focus on that, which is what this is. Now, has anybody here ever helped somebody who was pregnant and going through all of that? Or maybe yourselves, I have no idea. There's a method of breathing called Lamaze, right? Which is kind of cool. I mean, I'd go with my daughter's 28 now. I remember going to the Lamaze classes with her, and it teaches the woman to, my wife, who she calls herself nuts now, but she wouldn't have any epidural, nothing. She wanted it all natural, and she almost never whimpered through anything. She used the breathing techniques. This is a type of meditation in a way. Okay, they don't call it that, but this is type of that. So you find a place to focus in the room, and then you start rhythmic breathing. And what it does is reduces pain. So the way that they would do it with us is they would have the husbands go down at the foot of their wives, and they'd have the woman start Lamaze breathing. This is just practice, right? So they're pregnant, and this isn't in labor. And they would start Lamaze breathing, and then he would come around and tell us quietly, I want you to just continue putting more pressure on her ankle for the course of a minute and a half or two. And by the end of it, I want you to be squeezing with every last ounce of energy you have, like you're trying to break her ankle. And we're looking, they're like, no, seriously. So that's what we did. And I looked up, and my wife never even just got out of that rhythm. And then when we were all done, they told women to stop doing Lamaze breathing, and they said, guys, go grab your wife's ankles like you did at the end. And we all did, and they all jumped and half kicked us. And they said, isn't that something, how the focus that was going through in the meditative understanding changed the pain? This is a good story. One couple went to, the wife went to give birth, and the doctor, the nurse was in there, and they could see the woman's in pain, and he yelled to the husband, will you please start helping your wife with Lamaze breathing? And he went down to the base and started grabbing her ankles. And what the hell are you doing? You didn't realize that was an exercise, right? But anyway, that's funny crap. What do you guys, come on, laugh at that stuff. All right. So anyway, this is really, the goal here is we're trying to almost dementalize prayer. And how do we have things, and you can even do this in a mental visual thing, right? A lot of times we would, it sounds trite, but we'll say, all of a sudden, what I heard moved from my mind to my heart. But think about that, At some point, this does happen. And when this does happen, by the way, this understanding of synergistic, it's always Christ initiative. Never. There's nothing you can do to initiate this. This is something that Christ initiates, the Spirit initiates, and man participates in. All right? Now, let's see if there's anything else here. Oh, let's just say this. Whatever frustrates this, why can't we call it ugly? I mean, I'm just saying that as a springboard to the next thing, but why not, right? So those of you that did the essays on feminist aesthetics, you've got a connection between, beauty and peace and ugliness and injustice. But maybe we can think of this even beyond the physicality of beauty. I mean, and what other thing, if we're going to try to expand this understanding of beauty, as this becomes a way for us to know truth, then anything that frustrates that could be ugly. So all these things in our lives that, even though they may be good things, maybe if, we could sit down at one point, like if you're, and again, you have to work this out yourself, I don't know the circumstances. But if you're in a situation where, a job's gonna take you away from the family, sure it's gonna provide more money, but are you okay now? Why not look at that as like, maybe I'm letting an ugliness in the door. You know what, I don't need this, I've been told that over times. I've been told, well, these jobs don't come up too often. What are you gonna do? I don't want to be in an anxious state where somehow I think this is going to fulfill something. And it's not because you could use more money. Everybody could, right? But the reality is that we always drift into our particular budgets. I mean, we go on better vacations, we drive better cars, we get bigger houses. At what point are we going to plateau and say, this is good? Isn't it cool to be content? I'm good with where I'm at. So then you can start working on some of this stuff. So what happens with this type of prayer, how it could be a praying always, is it starts to reorient us, right? It's not just a matter of, well, I'm praying today, okay? It helps to reorient us. We'll talk about that. So it's right out of your article. He said that, there's fruits. Like, what comes out of this? If I'm going to try all this, what would I hope to gain? Well, he says there's 4 fruits, okay? He says one is, is centering. Now, that's not an unfamiliar term for a lot of you that are in meditation, right? So you're trying to focus. You're getting yourself away from all types of distractions. And what you're really trying to do is you're trying to internalize your mind and your heart almost to like an inner richness. This isn't truth that we found within you. I mean, we have to watch how far we go with this from a Catholic ethos standpoint. This is never an end in itself, okay? The other thing is remembering God. Now, the difference here is, remember I used the term anamnesis with you to one time? Just like we would say in liturgy, like, do this in memory of me. God is not saying that it is some intellectual recollection. Oh, okay, I remember you did that, so we're going to reenact it. Anamnesis is that eternal now, right? It's being made present. So the article actually talks about this type of remembering as a reactualization. So that's one of the fruits of it. Self-sacrificing love, that I think is pretty much self-descriptive, all right? But what happens is this becomes a prayer in your life because everything you do, someone else comes before you. We don't live in an age that really says that, right? Although we like people who live that way. So the other person will come before me. Go to like a buffet line, like where there's more food than a small country can eat, and they hardly ever run out, and see the fight over when somebody brings out a new tray of crab legs or something else. It's like, good God, there's what, like probably literally like 500 pounds of food out, and you're fighting over that. It's almost as if we can't even make it simple in a situation like that. Remember how, the old phrase, if you can't be trusted in little things, you can't be trusted in big things? Why is that not true? If you can't be kind in little ways, do you really expect somebody to be kind in big ways? We can go back to the last class with the men with the chest. And then when somebody is really, magnanimous in great ways, we tend to mock them. Or at the very least, we like to see them fall, to show their, the fact that, they're not perfect. So, again, this is all this struggle. So self-sacrificing love could be a way of praying without ceasing. And then it brings us back to the fourth one, that concept of longing. So we still have this joyful sorrow, right? This never goes away. So in a sense, it's almost as if, somebody you love, when they're gone, how you long for them. And when you're with them, you enjoy them, but you also realize that this is going to be temporal. They will once again be gone. So it's almost like a reciprocal type thing that goes on here. So anyway, these are just this author Father John Brecht's take on this, that there's at least these 4 fruits that come out of this type of prayer. By the way, I didn't even say what this Jesus prayer is that you could do. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me for I'm a sinner. So it gets very repetitive. So the Orthodox would have what they call prayer beads. Now that's not the same as a rosary in Roman Catholicism, but it's not entirely different too, right? I mean, when I was a kid, some of my friends would make fun and say, how many laps around the rosary does your mom do? That kind of thing. But we count them out. But it isn't like saying 10 Hail Marys is more important than saying 8 Hail Marys. It's a mantra, right? So a lot of religious expressions of meditation would have a mantra that you repeat and you repeat. Well, that's what these things are supposed to do. So in the article, there's what they call ejaculatory prayers, right? Just, Lord Jesus, Lord Jesus. And we even in the Roman Catholic tradition, we have like a resemblance of that, what they call the Jesus prayer. What do we say? Kyrie eleison, Christi eleison, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. So you find yourself in this repetitive type, I don't want to call it a trance, but it's a repetitive type mantra that's supposed to help clear the mind and bring yourself into a deeper understanding. So it's all part of a rhythm. But these are the effects of those things, right? Again, what we're doing with our body, the position of our body, the environment, it affects the heart. What affects the heart changes who we are, which is why we were so we're so careful as to what we put in our bodies for health-wise reasons, and that's good. But why are we not curious? I said it again. Must be something there. Why are we not so cautious of what we let enter the mind and the eyes, right? Like when I give talks to like younger people, some of the presenters always say, make sure you talk about pornography. We're against it. What is it that I'm supposed to say? I mean, it's all part of this. It's accepting. I mean, first of all, if somebody is finding a naked girl attractive, we understand that. But you're just choosing a lesser good. My favorite is Jerry Seinfeld. Everybody watch Seinfeld? Okay. Jerry Seinfeld said one time, he said, I never understood pornography. It's like sitting outside of a restaurant and watching somebody eat a steak through a glass window. He says, yeah, that looks good. I mean, he never, and that's a pretty neat understanding of it, right? But nonetheless, so the whole point of all of this is this changes who we are. If we're going to make the claim that beauty will save the world, that this is where the battlefield of the soul is, between God and the devil, that the goal isn't just to have that reflective, peaceful prayer, but that what changes the heart changes the person, because that is the center of our being. So it restructures our priorities. And all of a sudden, certain things are no longer necessary in the world. Other things are. And you become, remember Patch Adams? Remember what he said? He said, I wanted to be an intentional person. You know what he meant by that? The things that I'm doing, I want to mean to do them. They have to mean good. I'm not just going to haphazardly go through life and do what's next. I'm going to be an intentional. This is why I'm doing this. Almost theological, right? We have a purpose for the things that I do. All right. What do you think of this stuff? Do you think you'd be able to articulate, at least somewhat, how beauty might solve something